I never thought I'd see the day when my elderly mother, a woman who had spent her entire life teaching me patience and kindness, would be struck in the face by none other than our own neighbor, Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA. It happened so fast, I almost didn't process it. One sharp crack, her palm against my mom's cheek, the sound slicing through the warm afternoon air like a gunshot. For a moment, the entire neighborhood gathering froze. The smell of freshly cut grass, the hum of cicadas, even the laughter of children echoing from the playground. All of it seemed to stop as every eye turned to my mother, clutching her face in shock, her glasses nearly falling off. Gasps shot through the crowd. Someone muttered, "Oh my God, did she just—" Phones were raised, whispers spread like wildfire, and Karen, standing with her arms crossed, actually smirked as if she had just proven some kind of twisted point. My mom, frail but dignified, stood trembling, and I felt the kind of rage in my chest that shakes your bones. Every instinct screamed at me to lunge forward, to scream, to defend her honor right then and there. But instead, I did something else, something that made Karen's smirk falter. I wrapped my arm around my mom, steadied her glasses, and turned away without a word. The silence was louder than any shouting match. Neighbors stared at me, waiting for an explosion, waiting for me to drag Karen across the lawn. But I didn't. I guided my mom back toward our porch, her hand shaking in mine, my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Behind us, Karen's laugh rang out. Nervous this time, brittle, unsure. She didn't realize it yet, but that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Because what Karen didn't know, what none of them knew in that tense moment, was that I had already been collecting every cruel word, every petty fine, every threat she'd made against us. What Karen didn't know was that I had been recording everything, and that slap was the final piece I needed. The crowd might have thought I was walking away in defeat, but in reality, I was walking my mom straight into safety and Karen straight into the biggest regret of her life. When people hear the word home, they think of comfort, peace, safety. For me, it had always been that, until Karen came into the picture. My mom and I lived in a modest single-story house at the edge of the cul-de-sac, nothing fancy, but it carried decades of love. She had planted roses along the walkway when I was a kid, and even now at her age, she'd water them every evening, humming softly like she did when she used to tuck me in as a child. After my father passed away, that house became more than just shelter. It became her fortress, her little kingdom where memories lived. But to Karen, it was just another property to control, another neighbor to intimidate. Under the rules of the homeowners association, she practically ruled like a monarchy. Karen was the type of person who didn't just walk into a room, she invaded it. Loud voice, loud clothes, and an even louder sense of entitlement. She'd march across the street in her leopard print slippers, clutching her clipboard like it was a royal decree, pointing out imaginary violations. The mailbox paint was too faded. The roses were encroaching on common property. Once she even accused my mom of devaluing the neighborhood because our wind chimes supposedly annoyed her dog. It was relentless, this drip, drip, drip of harassment, and though my mom tried to brush it off, I could see the toll it was taking. She was a woman in her late 70s, frail in body but strong in spirit, and yet every letter Karen shoved into our mailbox chipped away at her peace. At first, I told her to ignore it. Bullies thrive on reaction, I said, but Karen wasn't content with silence. She needed submission. She thrived on seeing others bow down to her supposed authority, and my mom, gentle as she was, refused to kneel. That's when things escalated. It started small. Karen would spread whispers during HOA meetings, implying my mom was a troublemaker, that she didn't respect community standards. She'd roll her eyes dramatically whenever my mom spoke up, even if it was just to ask a question about lawn maintenance. Then came the fines, ridiculous ones, laughable even, except for the fact they came in stacks, each stamped with HOA authority. $50 for improper trash placement. $100 for holiday decorations displayed past season. My mom cried once, sitting at the kitchen table with those papers in front of her, and I swear that was the first time in years I'd seen her cry since my dad's funeral. I hated Karen for that. I hated that she could make my mother, the woman who had always been my rock, feel small in her own home. And still, my mom refused to retaliate. "We'll pay what we must, but we won't stoop to her level," she said. Her voice was steady, but I noticed the tremor in her hands as she folded those fines into neat little piles. I think that was the moment I realized Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she was the predator, and my mom was her chosen prey. What Karen didn't know was that I had already started documenting everything. Each fine, each letter, each insult. I bought a small camera for the porch, disguised as a light fixture. I recorded every HOA meeting I could attend, saved every email, every voicemail. At first, it wasn't even about revenge, it was about protection. If anything ever happened, I wanted proof. And deep down, I feared something would happen. Because Karen wasn't slowing down, she was escalating. The neighbors were split. Some whispered apologies to us in private, admitting they knew Karen was out of line, but saying they couldn't risk crossing her because she had the board wrapped around her finger. Others looked the other way entirely, too busy with their own lives to get involved. A few, though, especially the ones who benefited from Karen's favoritism, joined her chorus. They laughed at her jokes, nodded when she mocked us, and pretended not to notice the way my mom shrank a little smaller each time. I can still remember one afternoon when my mom came inside from watering her roses, her hands still damp with soil, and told me Karen had warned her that accidents happen when people don't follow rules. That's when I stopped seeing Karen as just a bully. That's when I started seeing her as dangerous. And yet, through it all, my mom tried to keep her dignity. She hosted tea in the afternoons, invited old friends over, and made me promise not to let Karen's poison turn me bitter. But bitterness is a hard thing to keep out when you see the person you love most being targeted day after day. I promised her I'd stay calm, but inside, I was building something far more dangerous than anger. I was building patience. Because I knew that if Karen ever crossed the line from harassment into harm, I'd be ready. Little did I know, that line was about to be crossed in the most public, humiliating way imaginable. And when it happened, the entire neighborhood would see it. And they'd see what happened after, too. The weeks that followed were like living under siege. Karen wasn't satisfied with fines and whispers anymore. She wanted domination. Every little thing we did seemed to become her personal mission to destroy. If the trash can lid wasn't fully closed, we'd get another letter. If the lawn mower left a strip of grass too long, she'd photograph it and slap us with a violation. One day, she even walked right onto our porch, clipboard in hand, inspecting the paint on our front door as if she were some government inspector instead of just a neighbor with too much free time. My mom asked her politely to step off the property. Karen's response? "This entire neighborhood is my responsibility. If you don't like it, you can move." I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from shouting at her. Instead, I just memorized every word, every smirk, every gesture. I wanted her to feel safe in her arrogance, because the higher she climbed on her self-built throne, the harder she'd fall when it all came crashing down. Karen's attacks started becoming public theater. At HOA meetings, she singled my mom out like she was some sort of criminal. "Mrs. Parker," she'd say in that syrupy fake voice, "your flower beds are lovely, but they're not within the guidelines." Then she'd wave papers around, rallying the board with exaggerated sighs and rolling eyes, as though my mom's roses were threatening the entire community. My mom would sit there, quiet, lips pressed into a thin line, refusing to give Karen the satisfaction of an outburst. But me? I could feel the heat rising in my face, the way people stared, some nodding along with Karen, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. And every time I felt that rage climb up my throat, I'd squeeze my mom's hand under the table, reminding myself of the camera in my bag recording every word. It wasn't just meetings, either. Karen seemed to take pleasure in humiliating us in front of neighbors. Once, when my mom put up a simple bird feeder in the backyard, Karen stormed over during a neighborhood barbecue, waving the HOA handbook and declaring it a violation. Everyone laughed nervously, trying to avoid taking sides, while my mom lowered her head in embarrassment. Another time, she cornered my mom in front of the mailboxes and loudly accused her of lowering property values because of unsightly garden gnomes. They were gifts for my late father. My mom walked away in tears that day, and that's when something shifted in me. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was calculating. Karen thrived on an audience. She needed people to see her power. She wanted gasps, whispers, fear. And while everyone else might have seen an HOA tyrant, I saw something different. A woman digging her own grave, one outburst at a time. The more public her cruelty became, the more proof I had. The more reckless she was, the easier it would be to expose her. I started carrying my phone everywhere, always set to record. I told a few sympathetic neighbors what I was doing, and some quietly agreed to send me clips they'd taken too. Bit by bit, I was building case. But Karen wasn't just tormenting my mom socially, she was breaking her down physically too. The stress started to show. My mom's blood pressure spiked, her hands shook more than before, and she began spending more time sitting by the window, staring out at the street as if expecting Karen to march up again with that clipboard. She'd never admit it out loud, but I could tell she was scared, and that fear made me furious. No one had the right to make my mom feel unsafe in her own home. One night, after another long day of harassment, I told her, "Mom, if she ever lays a hand on you, I swear." She cut me off, her voice soft but steady. "You won't need to swear anything. We'll deal with it the right way." But I could see the truth in her eyes. Even she knew Karen was capable of going too far. And then the incident happened that pushed everything past the point of no return. It was during an HOA-sponsored community event, a neighborhood cleanup day, followed by a barbecue on the green. Everyone was there, families with kids, older couples, teenagers running around. The kind of setting where Karen thrived, because an audience meant power. My mom and I showed up, determined to keep our heads down and participate. She was carrying a plate of cookies she'd baked for the event, still warm, wrapped in foil. I'll never forget the way Karen intercepted us, blocking the path like a guard dog. Well, she sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who decided to show up. Did you bring cookies or fines for everyone?" A few people chuckled nervously, more out of fear than amusement. My mom, ever the peacemaker, tried to hand her the plate. "I just wanted to contribute," she said softly. That's when Karen struck the plate from her hands, cookies scattering across the grass, and shouted, "We don't need your pity offerings here." Gasps echoed. Children stared. And my mom, my sweet, gentle mom, bent down to gather the cookies, her frail hands trembling. I rushed forward to help her, but Karen stepped closer, towering over her like a predator over prey. "Why don't you get it through your head? Nobody wants you here." And then she shoved her. It wasn't the slap yet, but it was close enough. My mom stumbled, catching herself on the picnic table, her face pale with shock. And in that moment, as the entire neighborhood stared, phones capturing everything, I knew the line had been crossed. There would be no going back. Karen wanted war. And war was exactly what she was going to get. The day of the HOA barbecue was supposed to be about community, laughter, neighbors coming together. But for my mom and me, it turned into the moment everything changed. We arrived early, hoping to blend in to avoid any drama. My mom wore her favorite pale blue cardigan, the one my father had given her years ago, and she carried another plate of cookies, determined to try again after Karen had humiliated her at the cleanup day. She wanted to show good faith, to prove that kindness could still exist even under Karen's shadow. I told her she didn't need to, but she just smiled softly. "It's who I am," she whispered. For a while, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, the evening would go smoothly. Kids were chasing each other across the grass, the smell of grilled burgers drifted through the air, neighbors chatted in folding chairs. We settled at a picnic table near the back, quietly watching. But peace never lasted long when Karen was around. She strutted across the lawn in her oversized sunglasses and wide-brimmed hat like she was the star of some reality show, clutching a red cup and flanked by her usual entourage, two neighbors who laughed at everything she said, whether it was funny or cruel. It didn't take long before her eyes locked on us. I could feel it before I even saw her coming, that sharp shift in energy like a storm cloud rolling over. She marched straight toward our table, heels stabbing the grass. Well, well, Mrs. Parker, she drawled loudly, making sure the whole barbecue could hear. Back again, I see. Didn't I make myself clear last time? The chatter around us died down, all eyes shifting our way. My mom's shoulders stiffened, but she kept her voice calm. Karen, I'm just here to enjoy the evening like everyone else. She gestured toward the cookies. I brought something to share. Karen sneered, leaning closer, her sunglasses reflecting my mom's fragile frame. Nobody wants your pity food, she spat. Then, without warning, she slapped the plate from my mother's hands again, cookies scattering in the dirt. Gasps rang out louder this time, sharper, as if the entire crowd had been shocked awake. My mom bent, instinctively, reaching for the fallen plate, but Karen didn't stop. She stepped closer, towering over her, and hissed, I told you don't belong here. And then it happened. In one swift, vicious motion, Karen raised her hand and struck my mother across the face. The sound cracked through the air like a whip. My mom's head snapped to the side, her glasses flying, her body stumbling backward against the table. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Children froze mid-play. Parents stared open-mouthed. Phones shot up into the air to capture the scene. I froze too, but not out of fear. Out of control. Because in that moment, every instinct screamed at me to launch across the table, to put Karen on the ground and make her pay. But I didn't. I couldn't, not yet. Instead, I caught my mom as she steadied herself, her cheek already reddening, her breath shaky. I slipped her glasses back into her trembling hand and whispered, I've got you. Then I looked up at Karen, and I smiled. It wasn't the smile of defeat, it was the smile of a trap snapping shut. Karen faltered just for a second because she expected outrage, screaming retaliation. What she didn't expect was calm. What she didn't expect was silence. Around us, the crowd erupted, gasps, shouts, angry whispers. A few people rushed forward, one woman crying out, Karen, what is wrong with you? Another man muttered, That's assault. Phones were still recording, catching every angle. But Karen, drunk on her own power, doubled down. She deserved it, she shouted, pointing at my mom like she was some criminal. This woman has been undermining the HOA for months. Someone had to put her in her place. That was her mistake. That was her confession, right there on camera in front of half the neighborhood. And I didn't need to lift a finger. I simply wrapped my arm around my mom, helped her to her feet, and walked her away from the chaos. Each step was heavy, deliberate, my silence louder than a scream. Behind us, voices rose in outrage, neighbors arguing, Karen's shrill voice cracking as she tried to defend the indefensible. The atmosphere had shifted completely. The crowd wasn't laughing with her anymore. They were staring at her, judging her, turning against her. As we reached our porch, I glanced back just once. Karen stood in the middle of the lawn, chest heaving, her entourage shrinking back. Her face wasn't smug anymore, it was pale, nervous. She sensed it, even if she couldn't articulate it yet. She had gone too far. The slap wasn't just a moment of cruelty. It was a mistake, a colossal one. And as the cameras continued to roll, capturing her tantrum, I knew one thing for certain. By the time I was finished, Karen would regret that slap more than anything she had ever done in her life. The slap changed everything. It wasn't just an act of cruelty anymore. It was evidence. Cold, undeniable evidence. And I didn't even have to lift a hand to get it. Karen had done it to herself, in front of dozens of witnesses, with a half-dozen phones pointed directly at her. By the time I guided my mom inside and helped her settle onto the couch, the videos were already spreading through the neighborhood group chat. One of my friends messaged me, It's going viral here. Half the HOA has already seen it. I checked on my mom first. Her cheek was swollen and red, but she kept insisting, I'm fine, don't make a scene. But it wasn't about a scene anymore. It was about justice. I knelt in front of her, taking her trembling hands in mine, and said quietly, You don't have to fight anymore. I'll handle this. For the first time in months, I saw relief in her eyes. I spent that night gathering everything: the letters, the fines, the photos, the recordings from meetings, even the voicemail Karen had left weeks earlier threatening that accidents happen when people don't follow rules. I laid it all out like puzzle pieces on the kitchen table, and right in the center, I placed the video of her slap. Watching it again made my blood boil, but it also fueled me. Every cruel smirk, every arrogant word. It was all about to be used against her. The very next morning, I filed a police report. Assault. Plain and simple. The officer barely blinked when I showed him the video. "This is cut and dry," he said. "We'll be contacting her." I also reached out to an attorney, someone who specialized in HOA abuse cases. When I sent him the folder of evidence, he actually whistled. "You've been building this for a while, haven't you?" he asked. I nodded. She picked the wrong family. But I didn't stop there. I knew Karen's real power wasn't just her arrogance, it was her grip on the HOA board. So I turned my focus there. I started quietly sending evidence to other neighbors, especially the ones who'd been afraid to speak up. The video was already doing half the work, but when they saw the mountain of harassment laid out in black and white, something shifted. People who had once stayed silent suddenly found their voices. A retired teacher down the street came by and told me, "I've put up with her bullying for years. No more." Another neighbor admitted Karen had fined him for having his garage door open too long. Story after story poured out, and with each one, her support crumbled. Within a week, there was a petition circulating to remove her from the board. Signatures piled up faster than even I expected. Karen, of course, tried to spin the story. She sent out emails claiming my mom had provoked her, that the video was edited, that she was the real victim. But no amount of twisting could erase the fact that half the neighborhood had seen it with their own eyes. The harder she tried to defend herself, the guiltier she looked. The HOA called an emergency meeting. The hall was packed, standing room only. Karen walked in with her usual swagger. But I noticed her hands trembled when she set down her papers. She launched into a speech about community standards and defending property values, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Murmurs rose. People interrupted her, shouting back about her behavior, her fines, her bullying. And then, when it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply played the video. On the projector screen, the sound of her slap cracked through the speakers, followed by her shouting. She deserved it. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, even boos. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but the board president banged his gavel and cut her off. "This is unacceptable," he said firmly. "This is assault, and it is unbecoming of any member, let alone a board leader." When the vote came, it wasn't even close. Karen was removed from her position, effective immediately. But that wasn't the end. The police followed through on the assault charge. She had to stand in court, facing not just my mom, but the entire community that had once been her kingdom. The judge didn't take kindly to her excuses. "You abused your position, and you struck an elderly woman in public," he said flatly. "You should be ashamed." She was fined, ordered to attend anger management, and slapped with a restraining order keeping her from approaching my mom again. The fallout was brutal for Karen. Her so-called friends stopped answering her calls. Parents whispered about her in front of their kids. The neighborhood that once feared her now pitted her, or worse, laughed at her. I'd see her sometimes staring out from behind her blinds as I water my mom's roses. No more leopard print slippers strutting across lawns. No more clipboards, just silence. And as for my mom, she healed. The mark on her cheek faded, and with it, the weight she had been carrying for months. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "I never thought silence could be louder than shouting. You were right to walk away that day." I smiled, but I told her the truth. It wasn't silence, Mom. It was a plan. Karen thought she could humiliate us, break us, control us. Instead, she exposed herself, and I simply let the truth do the work. And though part of me had craved revenge in that moment by the picnic table, I realized something far sweeter. Justice had done it for me. In the weeks after Karen's fall from grace, the neighborhood felt different, quieter, lighter, almost as if the air itself had been cleansed. The same cul-de-sac that once echoed with Karen's shrill voice and stomping slippers now carried only the sound of children's laughter, lawnmowers humming, and neighbors actually talking to one another without fear of interruption. For the first time in a long time, my mom walked down the street without clutching her chest in tension. She greeted neighbors with a smile, and this time they smiled back. People who had once looked away in shame now came forward to apologize. One woman told my mom, "I should have spoken up sooner. I'm so sorry for what you went through." Another man admitted, "She scared us all. You showed us it's okay to stand up." My mom, graceful as ever, forgave them. She always had more grace than I did. Karen, meanwhile, became a ghost in her own kingdom. She was no longer seen marching across lawns or lecturing about rules. Her email stopped. Her clipboard disappeared. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of her through her window blinds, face pale, eyes darting, as if watching a world she no longer belonged to. The restraining order kept her away from us, but she didn't need it. She was finished. She had burned her bridges and salted the earth. But the sweetest moment of all came during the next HOA election. My mom hadn't even planned to attend, but several neighbors insisted she come. "We need you there," they told her. She walked into the hall with me at her side, and the entire room stood. Applause broke out, real, thunderous applause that made her stop in her tracks, tears welling in her eyes. People called her brave, strong, even the heart of the neighborhood. And then, in a twist I never saw coming, someone nominated her to take a seat on the board. My mom laughed at first, shaking her head. "Oh no, not me." But the crowd insisted. They wanted her, not just because she had suffered, but because she represented the opposite of Karen: kindness, fairness, dignity. Against her protests, the votes came in. And just like that, the woman Karen had tried to break was elected as one of the HOA's newest board members. The irony was almost too perfect. Karen had tried to silence her, to drive her out. Instead, my mom was now part of the leadership, her voice stronger than ever. And while my mom promised she wouldn't use her position for revenge, I knew she didn't have to. Her very presence was proof of victory. Karen tried once, just once, to confront her at a board meeting. She showed up, uninvited, demanding to be heard. The board president calmly reminded her she had no authority there anymore. When she tried to argue, my mom, gentle, soft-spoken my mom, simply looked at her and said, "It's time to sit down, Karen." The room erupted in quiet laughter, and Karen, red-faced and trembling, stormed out for the last time. That night, as we sat on our porch again, my mom leaned back in her chair, sipping tea, and said, "Your father would have been proud." I swallowed hard, staring at the roses she had tended for so many years. "He'd be proud of you, Mom. You never gave up." She smiled, her face peaceful in the fading light. And in that moment, I realized revenge hadn't just been about making Karen pay. It had been about restoring what she tried to steal from us: dignity, respect, peace. And here's the part one wants you, the listener, to think about. We live in a world where bullies like Karen thrive on fear, on silence, on people turning the other way. But when you stand your ground, when you gather your truth, even quietly, it has more power than rage ever could. Karen thought we were weak. She thought an elderly woman and her adult child couldn't fight back. But we didn't fight with fists or insults. We fought with patience, with evidence, with the truth. And in the end, the truth won. So, let me ask you, if someone struck your mother in front of everyone, would you have fought back with rage in that moment, or waited like I did for the perfect revenge? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I know this will split opinions. And if you've ever seen someone like Karen get exactly what they deserve, share your story. I'd love to hear it. This was my story of how an HOA tyrant tried to break my family and ended up breaking herself instead. If you want more real stories like this, stories of betrayal, justice, and revenge, make sure you hit subscribe, because trust me, you won't believe what comes next.